right under the clavicle. So here's the clavicle. We can find the first rib, at least in a normal spine, right underneath the clavicle, right there. So that's the first place we can find that first rib, right there. The second place we can find the first rib that we may not think about quite as much, but hopefully you remember this from kinesiology, is actually within the back of the neck here. Okay, so if you kind of go into that mid-trap about a third of the way away from your cervical spine, between your shoulder and cervical spine, if you go about a third of the way, and if you kind of contact and then dip around that upper trap, you're going to actually be on the posterior aspect of that first rib. Okay? And so you've made a determination, let's say, that when you do that, you're contacting one side before the other side. So it means that there's an elevated first rib. In some cases, both are elevated in cases of muscle tightness. Remember, the scalene's attached to the first rib. So we can get these guys to be elevated, and then there's less space in here for the brachial plexus. Right? So this technique is going to address mobilizing that first rib in the back. Not in the front, but in the back. So we're going to contact it by using our second MCP. We're going to contact it right there. And what I'm trying to do, my force direction is kind of toward the opposite hip. So as I'm pushing down, notice my forearm is angled. I'm kind of doing this. I'm pushing down toward the opposite hip. And you might say, well, how do you know you're contacting that? Because I'm within the mass of the upper trap, and there's nothing else that's firm in there except the first rib. So I kind of find that first rib. Sometimes it's hard. You're going through tight muscles, not always the most comfortable thing in the world. But if you're intent on getting that first rib to depress, this is the way to do it. So you're here like this. I'm going to try to put all those muscles on slack. Otherwise, I'm fighting through the upper trap. So what might I do to the upper trap to put that on slack? Yeah, I might side bend the head toward that side. So I kind of think about folding the head over my hand. The purpose of that is just to put all that muscle that I'm trying to get through, just to kind of relax it a little bit. Relax that a little bit. That allows me to get that second MCP into that rib with that head bent over to the side. And then my force direction is trying to go toward the opposite side. So I've done this in supine. The patient's lying like this, and I kind of come in and dip down and then kind of push. Or we can do it the way that I'm going to show you now, which I think is the best because it allows us to kind of use their body weight to help me out a little bit with this. So who could I borrow? Awesome. So let's have you sit here and face that direction. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of sit up on the table with Ben here, and I want to address, let's say, this left side, okay? So I ultimately want to kind of be within that upper trap, and I'm kind of thinking about where that first rib is. Here's his clavicle. So below that, I'm kind of feeling there's the first rib there, there's the first rib there. Sometimes I'll do a little Pac-Man thing. I'll do like a waka 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 thing, right? So I'm in here like this, and if I'm below the clavicle here, and I push on that first rib, oddly, sometimes you can feel it in here. So sometimes I'll kind of like oscillate back and forth that first rib in this plane, usually supine, it's much easier to feel. So I'll kind of like, make sure where I am with that and kind of get a sense of where that first rib is. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to put that upper trap on slack. So I'm going to do that by basically trying to kind of relieve all of the structures that may be involved in contributing to that. So first of all, if I elevate his arm, if I abduct his arm, that puts that upper trap on slack. Okay? The second thing I might do is I'm going to, as we mentioned, is I'm going to side bend his head. So now that upper trap is much less tense than it was, a minute ago. Okay? So I'm just kind of here like this, and I try to get him as relaxed as possible, and then I side bend this direction so that I kind of keep him in that position. And then the last piece is putting that second MCP at that posterior rib. So I'm kind of here like this, kind of push in, and because that upper trap's on slack, I can now kind of make contact and feel that firmness there. And then the way that I'm going to do this is I'm just going to basically kind of have Ben shift to the right. So I'm going to kind of have him shift to the right like this. So I'm kind of doing this, and then back out. And shift, and then back out. So I'm kind of like collapsing him over my hand. Okay, so it's here. I'm kind of just relax for me if you can. That's good. So I'm kind of shifting him, and then back up. Back up. I might push down and hold and have him take a deep breath in. As he takes a deep breath, I'm holding down. Now he releases and exhales, and as he exhales, I push that rib further. So what are we doing there? Well, we're actually stretching the scalenes, right? Because here's that rib, here are the scalenes. So I'm holding that rib down and having him take a breath. He's using accessory muscles, but I'm not letting the rib move. So So I'm stretching the scalene, and then as he exhales, it's almost like a hold relax. As he exhales, then I can push that rib a little bit further down. Now, you're going to say, well, how do I know I'm definitively on the rib? I don't think you can. There's the scapula's here, and the cervical spine's here, so there's nothing else there. So keep going until you run into something that doesn't move. That's what you're going to push on. Okay, not the most comfortable thing in the world. That doesn't feel real comfortable for people. That's better than the one supine. People really hate that one. So that's why I showed that one to you. If that's the case, the next thing I will do, and we don't have to do these on each other, just so you have kind of a sample there, is I'll take this towel and I'll put it under his armpit and go ahead and kind of bring your arm down for me. That's good. And I'll pull this over like that, and now hold that with your right hand. Hold that in. Now I'll have him do things at home where he's holding that rib down and kind of stretching. Or I might have him hold the rib down and take a deep breath against that resistance, and then as he exhales, I have him push a little bit more with the towel. So that's like a self first rib mobilization. This actually is a great kind of technique to use for upper trap levator stretching as well. Because if I have a really tight upper trap and I do this, the shoulder elevates, right? And we can test that with Ben. He's a great candidate for this because I anticipate he has some of this. So go ahead and side bend to the right for me. So kind of appreciate that motion. What are you feeling there?
Stretch. My
In
left.
here? Yeah, okay. So bring it back up again. Now let me have this arm. Just kind of relax it for me and bring it up. Just not completely relax that. Let me hold you. Just completely relax that. That's it. Now side bend to the right. Further?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you feel the pull?
Yeah.
A little bit, but not as much, right?
No,
And,
not
and
as
you're going much further, right? Okay, and back down again. So just by putting that upper trap on slack, you see the motion we have in there? So even somebody that isn't maybe having symptoms, although he might have a few, probably would benefit from, let's do some upper trap stretching. So that shoulder wants to elevate with that tight upper trap. The towel helps us to kind of hold that down.